Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, Israel declares it's defeated Hamas in Khan Yunis and is moving on to other targets. Mothers of IDF soldiers protest President Biden's policies at the American embassy. And Israeli military experts assess what needs to happen next in the war with Hamas. Plus, rabbis and Christian leaders walk the halls of Congress to raise bipartisan support for Israel. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Here's some of the latest on the military and diplomatic fronts facing Israel. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says the IDF reached a major military milestone, the defeat of Hamas in Khan Yunis. Now he says the IDF is moving on to their next targets.
The Khan Yunis brigade boasted that it would stand strong against the IDF. Today it is dismantled. And I'm telling you that we are completing the mission in Khan Yunis. And we will also reach Rafah, and we will eliminate anyone who's there, who is a terrorist, who is trying to attack us.
On the diplomatic front, the State Department kept up its push for a Palestinian state and implement a two-state solution. Thomas Friedman of the New York Times reported on what he says is part of President Biden's doctrine for an unprecedented diplomatic initiative to promote a Palestinian state now. UK Foreign Minister David Cameron said Thursday his country could recognize a Palestinian state.
That's long been our position. And of course, as part of that, Britain, along with other countries, would recognize Palestine as a country and recognize Palestine at the United Nations.
Britain's top diplomat said the UK's recognition could come after a ceasefire in Gaza, without waiting for talks to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The push for a Palestinian state comes while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejects it, along with the rest of the government and the majority of the Israeli people who oppose it, as their sons and daughters are fighting the same people who would make up that state. On Thursday, in an unprecedented move, President Biden issued an executive order that targets Israelis in the West Bank who have been accused of attacking Palestinians in biblical Judea and Samaria.
That we will also take action on behalf of the United States, both against those who engage in settler violence and extremist settler violence that have been prosecuted by governments, and others who have not.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu issued a statement that says, in part, the vast majority of residents of Judea and Samaria are law-abiding citizens, many of whom are fighting right now in active and reserve duty to protect Israel. Israel acts against all violators of the law in all places, and therefore there was no place for drastic steps on this matter. The move came as Democratic voters are deeply split over Biden's conduct of the war, and he's losing support among Arab Americans, especially in Michigan, where he campaigned Thursday. Meanwhile, U.S. negotiators are pushing for a ceasefire that could release more hostages.
It's terrible, okay, because in the last time we did a ceasefire, we lost a lot of soldiers after that.
As the Biden administration presses Israel on a ceasefire and increasing humanitarian aid into Gaza, one key group is pushing back. Here's that story from the American Embassy in Jerusalem. The demonstration here in Jerusalem outside the U.S. Embassy is designed to send a message to President Biden and his administration by the mothers of IDF soldiers.
I'm an American and an Israeli citizen, and I am here to ask of the American government to allow us and give us the backing to win this war. Winning this war that was forced upon us by Hamas and the Gazans. This is a war that is existential.
These women, who have sons and daughters fighting to defeat Hamas, wrote to President Biden with three main appeals. Allow Israel to keep fighting until Hamas is defeated and the 136 hostages are freed. No further entry of humanitarian aid or fuel, which goes to Hamas and makes it stronger. Pressure Egypt to permit Gazans stuck in the war zone to voluntarily leave.
I think it's very important that President Biden and the American government understands that everybody knows that the aid is not getting to the innocent Palestinians. Everybody knows that.
Shin Bet, Israel's equivalent of the FBI, estimates Hamas steals at least 60% of the humanitarian aid going into Gaza. UNRWA, accused of connections to Hamas, distributes what's left. The mothers of the IDF maintain the aid makes Hamas stronger and prolongs the war.
Almost everything is going to the hands of the terrorists of Hamas that are using it to fight and try to kill my children and our soldiers.
I feel that we're being pressured not to fight fully. I feel that America, who is really our best friend and has great and wonderful intentions, and thank God for America, I feel they don't understand this, that we need to bring Hamas to its knees and then they'll negotiate. It doesn't work the other way around while they're sitting underground with all our supplies.
The group believes the best way to help Gazans is for Egypt to allow them to gain freedom.
There are Gazans that want to leave. There are Gazans that don't want to live in the conditions where they are now or even in the conditions previous to this war. Open the doors. Open the doors to the world and allow them to leave.
They add the priority for any humanitarian aid should go to the remaining hostages.
The humanitarian cause that is most prevalent is that our hostages are being kept captive by the terrorists. Our sons and daughters, babies, elderly, sick, are not allowed to be visited, are not visited by the Red Cross, and have not received anything from any source that could be connected to humanitarian aid.
As Secretary of State Antony Blinken visits Israel for the 6th time since the beginning of the war, it's a message they hope he'll take back to the White House. Coming up, discussing the intersection of U.S. politics and Israel's war for the right to exist. Israel and the U.S. appear to have increasingly divergent approaches to how to proceed in the war with Hamas. I spoke with our Middle East analyst John Wagi about possible reasons for this. John, great to be with you. In our report, we talked about a almost desperate push by the U.S. to get a Palestinian state. What's behind this, do you think?
Yeah, you know, Chris, it seems like it's becoming the irresistible force meets the immovable object. And you wouldn't have thought that 2 months ago, when the parade of people coming from Washington were support for Israel, support for the hostages, support for the Israeli people in really their goal to eliminate Hamas, which is ironically the same goal that Premier Netanyahu made this week. Mm-hmm. So what's changed? There's almost a desperation in the U.S. effort, it seems, and now they're enlisting the support of the UK.
Exactly.
And it's a push that I believe is born out of the electoral politics of 2024.
Yeah, we had an Israeli commentator write an article about that, Michael Freund, about it's really about Michigan. Why Michigan?
Well, Michigan has 200,000 to 300,000 Arab voters, and they're not happy right now. They want to see a more, quote, even-handed approach to the war in Gaza. But it's at the same time, the Democrats are trying to keep their Jewish donors on board, and we saw that as a problem with the colleges and universities where Jewish donors are saying, we're not given to this, and now they may say, well, we're not giving to the Biden campaign. So there's a push to say this is the only way we can have peace in the Middle East. We'll get the Saudis on board, we'll get everybody else on board, and Netanyahu, you're just going to have to face up to it. The problem is that Netanyahu is speaking for almost everyone in Israel. If you spend 5 minutes here, you hear people saying they don't want their soldiers endangered by another prolonged ceasefire. They don't want the hostages released at the expense of a rebuilding of Hamas later on. They certainly don't want a Palestinian state where the aging Mahmoud Abbas would somehow share power with Hamas when they were never able to do that before. The pieces of the puzzle just don't fit. And you're trying to figure out how the global community is trying to make them fit.
Yeah,
you know?
and they're also sort of bucking history. 30 years after the Oslo Accords, still not a two-state solution. And they're talking about a, quote, revitalized Palestinian Authority.
Right. And for most Israelis, I think it's safe to say that Oslo is dead and buried for the most part. And I think many people are surprised it's being resurrected, especially now when the war is far from complete, even though Israel's had a few victories.
Yeah, that's right. Well, John, we'll have to leave it there. We'll continue to watch this and see how Israel does in the face of this military and diplomatic pressure. Thanks. A new Israeli security group seeks to change the national conversation about how the country needs to face its many threats and military challenges. Take a look. The Israel Defense Security Forum, founded by retired General Amir Avivi, called the conference together with Israel at war.
We have the best analysts and people from all the society, including people who lost soldiers, commanders who have fought in Gaza, people who live in the surroundings of the north and the south who have been evacuated.
They came to address four main issues.
One is the military campaign. We're talking about the campaign and how to really reach the goals of war, eradicating Hamas completely, releasing the hostages. It's a crucial issue, it's a crucial discussion at the moment in the society, within the government and the army. Then, of course, reinforce the society because the IDF is winning big time. And people need to be, resolute and with a lot of assurance that we're going to do it.
Second, what happens the day after the conflict?
Everybody's talking about the day after. The day after will impact for generations. The decision-making that will be done in this coming year about how will Gaza look the day after, the North, Lebanon, possibly Iran. These decisions will really shape the future of Israel, and it's a very, very crucial and important discussion which requires really a complete shift in the way Israel has thought about that in the last few decades.
Third, how to avoid the divisions in the nation before October 7th.
A society that was torn apart, huge discussions. Now we are united in the face of war, and really the big question is, how do we stay united? The day after, what kind of society, what DNA is needed for the Israeli society to really overcome all the challenges that we are going to have in the future?
Fourth, keeping an eye on the big picture.
This is not just a local war, it's a global war. It's a war of we see basically, a Chinese, Russian, Iranian front that has emerged in the Middle East. It's also impacting Africa and other regions with possible wars in the Pacific and in Europe. We need to see the big picture.
Avivi says Israel is at an historic time.
I think that what we're experiencing is a biblical moment that will really impact Israel for generations. The whole Israeli society will change. And I think that I'm saying to people, look, the war will be long, it will be hard. But this is a very special moment, and I see a bright future for Israel. But first, we need to win.
Up next, speaking up for Israel and the Jewish people, American pastors and rabbis unite on Capitol Hill to help defeat Hamas. Recently, in Washington, D.C., dozens of Christian pastors and Jewish rabbis walked the halls of Congress together, meeting with lawmakers from both sides of the aisle. Robert Stearns of Eagles Wings Ministry spoke with CBN President Gordon Robertson about encouraging representatives and senators to speak up for Israel and the Jewish people.
Why is it important for Christian and Jewish leaders to meet together with lawmakers? You know, Gordon, the issues facing Israel are not really isolated in any way to Israel itself. The battle that Israel is facing is a battle that affects the whole world. And the need for Christians to take a stand, an educated stand in this moment as never before. So tomorrow we're going, rabbis and pastors, Democrats, Republicans, coming together. This is an American issue. This is a human issue, and it's absolutely necessary for us to lift our voices.
I hope the UN is going to be on the agenda. It's still amazing to me that no division, no one of a position and authority at the UN has condemned the October 7th attacks. It's absolutely incredible that they can't even call evil for what it is. And then you've got UNRWA and terrorists are being funded on salary with a UN agency. Is that going to be one of the topics?
It's absolutely one of our core talking points tomorrow, because the issue that we're facing right now is we're in this moment that Scripture warned us about, where those will call evil good and good evil. The United Nations, which is supposed to be safeguarding human rights around the world, is absolutely culpable in terrorism in Israel, in Gaza. This is now proven. And Gordon, I want to say, 700 Club has been warning for years that we have got to wake up to these realities that Israel faces in the Middle East. And I want to encourage Christians around the world to begin praying as they've never prayed before, and to begin speaking to their pastors and their denominational leaders. It is time to get educated and involved in the battle for Jerusalem, because this is a battle for human rights all around the world.
Let's talk about the State Department, because I'm concerned about some policies coming out of there. They didn't want the embassy to move to Jerusalem, and President Trump got around their objections. And now they're talking about a two-state solution. And in that talk, the Democrats are now saying they're going to make it part of their policy and part of the policy of the United States, and they're talking about legislation to do that. How do you view that proposal? Is that even possible on the ground today?
Listen, Israel accepted a two-state solution from the very beginning. The Palestinians have been offered a two-state solution even prior to 1948. The Israelis have accepted this over and over again. The Palestinians have rejected this over and over again. The greater Arab world has rejected it. And now that you've got a radicalized population in Gaza, funded by Iran, supported going through Qatar, how are we supposed to think when you've educated a generation of children in Jew hatred, when you've educated a generation of children telling them that Israel is going to be wiped off the face of the map and a global caliphate is going to be reinstated? How do we think that this is tending towards peace? The battle that Hamas is fighting is not a battle for a Palestinian state. It's not a battle for the Palestinian people or their future. It's a battle to establish a global caliphate. Israel is the little Satan. America is the big Satan. And so when we see this unbelievably obtuse thinking in the State Department, and Gordon, also in America's institutions of higher learning, it's absolutely terrifying. And this is why we have to follow the lead that the 700 Club has called us to for all these years. Don't just pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Get active, get educated, become an informed ambassador on behalf of what Israel is facing.
How can our viewers help you in your meetings tomorrow?
Well, first of all, obviously they can pray. Second of all, I'd ask them to call their pastors and say, Pastor, where are we standing on Israel? How do we support? Eagleswings.org, our website, constantly is putting out fresh information. And of course, your father was a part of our Day of Prayer for the Peace of Jerusalem when we launched all those years ago. This is the hour for all Christians to rise to our spiritual heritage, which is based there in Jerusalem, and become informed ambassadors on behalf of Israel and the Jewish people. Gordon, we are in a Bonhoeffer moment. Dietrich Bonhoeffer tried to rally the church in Germany as he saw the evil of Hitler arising, as he saw the storm clouds on the horizon. Bonhoeffer began to lift his voice, and Gordon, only 16% of the churches in Germany sided with Bonhoeffer and stood against the evil of Hitler. And we saw what happened. America must not repeat this mistake. This is our Bonhoeffer moment, and we need to rise to it.
Absolutely. It's time for us to be the confessing church. That's what they named it. And our confession needs to be, yes, we stand with Israel. Let's just take a moment and pause. What's it like for the Jewish community? You just got back from Israel. So obviously they're grieving, but I think it's an even deeper wound than that. And what's it like for the Jewish community in Israel, and what's it like for the Jewish community right here in America?
Well, yes, my family and I were in Jerusalem on October the 7th. And in fact, the first 5 days of the war, we were with Chris Mitchell, your bureau chief, almost every day. Our hotel was right near the CBN bureau there in Jerusalem. And it was unthinkable what was happening. Gordon, I have been with significant Jewish families and leaders over the past weeks who literally, I'm not being sensational here, who literally have looked at me and said, if things keep getting bad, do you think there are people who will hide us? This is the level of terror that is striking in the hearts of the Jewish people, because we've talked for 75 years, never again, and yet we see in the halls of America's best universities, in the far left of the Democratic Party, we see absolute confusion, ignorance, and collusion with evil. And so the Jewish people are understandably scared as never before. Having said that, thank God that there is today a strong state of Israel that is resolute, that is firm, that is well able to defend their borders. And I believe Israel is going to rise to this crisis. And we remember the words of Psalms, Hine lo yanum ve'lo yashan shomer Yisrael. He who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep.
Amen. And he won't. He will continue to guard. Our hope is in him.
Still ahead, a mother watches her sons leave for war. See how she's relying on God to bring them home safe and sound. CBN Israel has been reaching out to single mothers for years, and among them are now mothers sending sons and daughters to war. One woman shared how she relies on God to keep her sons safe.
I've been living in Israel for 27 years. I came from Mexico. I have 2 children, 2 boys, who are in the army at this moment. One is 21, the other one is 23. I've been coming to these beautiful meetings that CBN make for 10 years. We love coming here. These events of Hanukkah and every event that CBN does is just like a breath for us as single moms. We go through things that are so difficult. We have to take care of our children, houses, take work, and we're alone. We're mom and dad at the same time. And usually people don't think too much about us. So having these events where we can come and just feel blessed and loved, accepted, and we can be together, we can hug each other, we can sing, we can eat together, is such a blessing. It's such a blessing. Many of us have kids in the army. It was shocking to suddenly, see my son coming into the room and saying, I've been called, I have to go. And just pray that God will protect him, because I didn't even know where he was going to go. It was such a shock, also because we were hearing the missiles coming our way. And it's like, you feel like this is a movie, this is not happening. This is just not happening. I think that the only thing that really really kept me going was praying and trusting in God, just believing. You know, it's like you pray and you tell God, please just send your angels to be with them, to be with all the soldiers that are together, and believe that what you pray will be done. Hanukkah is always about light, about seeing God. It's about seeing His light. If there is somebody that has less faith, and you know, the ones that we have more faith, we can encourage. Sometimes we come into these times that are so difficult because you need to give your child to God really and say, here it is. You have no control. Are you going in anxiety or are you having faith? And I chose faith. I chose to trust in Him and to trust my children to Him.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media and access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And please continue to pray for the safety of IDF soldiers, all those caught in harm's way, and for the safe return of all the hostages. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.